She was 18 years old, and on the morning of her birthday, she came downstairs and found her suitcase packed, sitting by the front door, like it had been waiting for her. There was a note on top, $300 in an envelope, and a mother who had already turned the lock. No goodbye, no explanation, just a daughter, a door, and the long road that begins when the people who were supposed to love you decide they cannot. 3 days later, she sat in a Boston hostel with her last dollar in her pocket, and she made a choice that should not have made any sense. She bought a house. Not a house, really. A ruin. A crumbling stone cottage on the far western edge of Ireland. So remote the nearest village was 5 miles on foot. Empty since 1953. €1. About $1.10 in American money. The roof was gone. The chimney was half fallen. Nobody had set foot inside in over 70 years. But underneath the hearth of that old cottage, sealed beneath a single great stone, was something a woman had hidden 80 years before, something she had prayed about, something she had left for a stranger she would never meet. And the day that stranger finally arrived, everything changed. Naomi Achebe was 18 years old, and on the morning of her birthday, she came downstairs in her bare feet, holding her grandmother's leather journal against her chest, and saw the suitcase, black, zipped, standing upright by the front door, like it had been waiting there all night. She stopped on the 3rd stair from the bottom. She didn't breathe. The kitchen was quiet. The coffee pot was off. Her mother was not at the counter. Her father was not at the table. The dishes from last night sat clean in the rack, dried untouched, like a kitchen in a house where nobody actually lived. There was a note on top of the suitcase. White paper, folded once. Her name on the outside in her mother's neat, clean nurse's handwriting. Beside it, an envelope. Thick. Naomi walked down the last 3 stairs, slowly. The hardwood was cold under her feet. She could feel every grain of it, every imperfection, every familiar dip and creak of the boards she had grown up walking on. She knew this house the way you know your own body. She knew which step squeaked. She knew which floorboard was loose under the dining room rug. She knew the kitchen smelled different on Sundays than on weekdays. And this morning, her birthday morning, the house smelled like nothing, like nobody lived here anymore. She picked up the note. "Naomi," it said, "we love you. But we cannot watch you make these choices. When you are ready to be serious about your life, you know where to find us." That was it. 3 sentences. For 18 years of a daughter. She read it again, because the words did not make sense the first time, because surely there had to be more. Surely there had to be a name signed at the bottom. Surely there had to be the word mom or dad or please or come back or anything. There was nothing, just the sentences, and the envelope, and the suitcase. She opened the envelope. $300, crisp, new, from the bank. Her father had gone to the bank for this. That detail, that one detail, cracked something open in her chest that she would not be able to close for a very long time, because her father loved her. Her father had taught her to ride a bicycle in the parking lot of the Brookline Elementary School. Her father had stayed up with her the night she failed her first geometry test. Her father had once told her, when she was 9 years old, that she was the best thing he had ever made in his life. And her father had gone to the bank for this. Naomi did not cry. She would think about that later, many times, how she did not cry, how she just stood there in the kitchen of the house she had grown up in, holding the note and the envelope, with the cold of the hardwood floor still pressing up through the soles of her feet. and inside her chest. Inside her chest there was something quieter than crying, something further down than tears could reach. She walked back upstairs. She got dressed. She brushed her teeth. She splashed water on her face. She looked in the mirror. The girl in the mirror was 18 years old. She had her mother's cheekbones, her father's eyes, her grandmother Adaeze's mouth. She was wearing the small gold ring with the turquoise stone on her right index finger. The ring Adaeze had given her. The ring Adaeze had worn since her own wedding in 1962. The ring caught the bathroom light. Naomi touched it. Twice. For luck, or for love, or for something she could not name. Then she went back downstairs. She picked up the suitcase. She picked up the canvas tote bag her grandmother had given her with the leather journal tucked safely inside. She did not look at the family photographs on the wall going down the hallway. She did not look at the framed school certificates on the side table. She did not look at the kitchen one more time. She opened the front door. She stepped outside. She closed the door behind her, and she heard the lock click. From the inside, somebody had been waiting on the other side, listening for her to leave, locking the door before she could even get down the front steps. Naomi stood on the porch of the only house she had ever lived in. The sun was coming up over Brookline. The sprinklers were on across the street. A jogger was running past with a small dog on a leash. A school bus was rumbling at the corner. A perfectly ordinary morning for everybody. Except her. She walked to the sidewalk. She did not look back. She would not look back for many years. Naomi Achebe was born in Boston to two people who had crossed an ocean to get there. Her father, Emeka, was a software engineer. He came to America in 1993 with one suitcase and an engineering degree from the University of Lagos, and a promise to himself that he would build a life so steady, so dependable, so reliably middle-class American that his future children would never have to wonder where the next month's rent was coming from. He had kept that promise. Her mother, Chiamaka, was a registered nurse. She came over 2 years after Emeka with their wedding certificate and a sponsorship visa and a quiet, careful way of looking at the world that made strangers trust her instantly. She worked the night shift at Brigham and Women's Hospital for 15 years. She held the hands of dying people. She rocked premature babies. She paid the mortgage. Together, they built the Brookline house, the 2 cars, the college fund, the vacations to Cape Cod every August, and Naomi, their only child, their daughter, the one who was supposed to make all of it make sense. She was a quiet child, the kind of child who sat in the back of every classroom and noticed everything. She read constantly, anything, cereal boxes, old magazines, her father's engineering manuals, her mother's nursing textbooks. By the time she was 7, she was reading novels meant for adults. By the time she was 9, she was writing them, or trying. She filled notebook after notebook with stories and poems and fragments. Her grandmother, Adaeze, who came from Lagos every summer to stay for a month, was the only person who took those notebooks seriously. Adaeze would sit with her on the back porch in the long Boston twilight and ask her to read aloud. Adaeze would close her eyes while she listened. Adaeze would not interrupt, not once. When Naomi was done, Adaeze would open her eyes, and she would smile, and she would say the same thing every time. You have it. You have what grandma the thing the women in our family have always had. Some of us hid it. Some of us were not allowed to use it. But you have it, and you have time. Naomi did not understand. Not then. She thought her grandmother just meant she was a good little writer. She would learn. Years later, in a stone cottage on the western edge of Ireland, what her grandmother had really meant. Adeze gave her the ring when Naomi was 12 years old. It was a small gold ring with a single tiny turquoise stone set into a simple band. Adeze had worn it since her own wedding in 1962. She slipped it off her own finger one afternoon, on the back porch, with the sound of cicadas going, and she put it on Naomi's right index finger, and she held Naomi's hand between both of hers. "This ring knows things," Adeze said. "What things, Grandma? Things you do not know yet. One day, this ring will travel somewhere you do not expect, and when it gets there, you will understand." Understand what? Why your grandmother loved you so much. Naomi was 12. She did not understand a single word of that, but she remembered every syllable. Adeze died when Naomi was 14. The phone rang at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday in October. Naomi's mother answered, and from the way, Chiamaka's body went very still in the kitchen. From the way she gripped the edge of the counter with her free hand. From the way she said 3 words in Igbo and then could not say anything else. Naomi knew. She knew before her mother turned around. She knew before her mother sank slowly to the floor with the phone still pressed to her ear. She knew before her father came running in from the bedroom. Her grandmother was gone. Naomi did not get to go to the funeral. Her parents said it was too expensive. They said it was too disruptive to her school year. They said her grandmother would understand. Naomi did not argue, because she had already learned by 14 that arguing with her parents was like arguing with the side of a building. The building does not move, and you only hurt your hands. But something inside her broke that month. Something small, something deep, something that would not heal for a very long time. She kept wearing the ring. Every day, for the next 4 years, she touched it when she was nervous. She touched it when she was writing. She touched it when she needed to remember that somewhere in the world somebody had once loved her without conditions. And she did not know yet. She could not have known that the ring was about to do exactly what her grandmother had promised it would do. The trouble started in her junior year of high school. It started small, the way all the worst things start small. Her parents began asking her about her college plans. That was reasonable. Every parent in Brookline asked their 17-year-old about college plans. That was the whole point of Brookline. You moved there so your kids could go to good colleges. The problem was the kind of college they had in mind, pre-med or pre-law, or at absolute minimum engineering, something with a title, something with a salary, something that justified 2 people crossing an ocean and working themselves down to the bone for 25 years. And Naomi. Naomi wanted to be a writer. She had wanted to be a writer since she was 9 years old. She had a stack of notebooks under her bed that proved it. She had published poems in her school literary magazine. She had won a small regional poetry contest when she was 16. The judge had written her a personal letter, telling her she had a real voice. Her parents had read the published poem. They had told her it was nice. And then they had asked her that same week about her plans for the MCAT. She did not argue. She just kept writing. Quietly. At night. In the bedroom where she had grown up. In November of her senior year. She did something her parents did not know about. She applied to a writing program at a small but very prestigious university in New England. A program known for poetry. A program that took only 15 students a year out of 2,000 applicants. She wrote her essay in 3 days. She poured everything into it. The grandmother, the notebooks, the ring, the thing, in March. The acceptance letter arrived in the mailbox. Her father got the mail that day. He opened the letter at the kitchen table while Naomi was at school. He read it. He set it down on the table. He did not say a word. Her mother came home an hour later from her shift at the hospital. Her mother read it. And then, Naomi's parents sat in that kitchen for close to an hour, speaking in rapid, urgent Igbo, a language Naomi had only partly learned, because they had never quite gotten around to teaching her. She came home from school at 3:30. She walked through the front door. She felt the air in the house. And she knew, immediately. They were waiting at the kitchen table, both of them. The letter was sitting between them, face up, like a defendant at a trial. "Sit down, Naomi." She sat. "You applied to a writing program." "Yes." "You did not tell us." "No." "Why not?" "Because I knew what you would say." Her father looked at her mother. Her mother looked at her father. Her mother spoke first. "Naomi, we will not pay for this. I have financial aid. I qualified. You will not qualify for enough, not without our income statement. And we will not sign it." Naomi felt her face go very hot, very fast, and very still. "So I just don't get to go. You can go to college. You can go to a real program. We will pay for medicine. We will pay for law. We will pay for engineering. We will not pay for poetry. It's not just poetry. It's a writing program. It's one of the best in the country." "It is a hobby," her mother said. "And you cannot feed a family with a hobby." That night, Naomi did not eat dinner. She went up to her room. She closed the door. She sat on her bed. She did not turn on the light. She just sat there in the dark with her grandmother's ring on her finger, until the moon came up over the neighbor's roof and slid silver light across her bedroom floor. She did not write that night. For the first time in 9 years, she did not open a notebook. She just sat and listened to the house. She listened to the radiators ticking. She listened to her mother walking down the hallway. She listened to her father in the basement working on his laptop. She listened to the quiet of a house she had grown up in, a house that no longer felt like hers. In June, Naomi graduated from high school with honors. Her parents came to the ceremony. They took photographs. They smiled. They posted one of the photographs to their Facebook page with the caption, "So proud of our daughter." 2 weeks later, the night before her 18th birthday, Naomi could not sleep. She got up at 1 in the morning to get a glass of water. The light was on at the bottom of the stairs. Her parents were in the kitchen, talking, in Igbo. She stopped on the 3rd stair from the bottom, the same stair she would stop on the next morning. When she came down to find the suitcase, she did not mean to listen, but she heard her own name. She crouched down, slowly. She did not breathe. She could not understand all of it. The Igbo was too fast, too colloquial, too full of words her parents had never bothered to teach her. But she could understand pieces, fragments. Enough. She heard her mother's voice, hard, strange, not the voice Naomi knew. She heard her mother say, "She is like my mother, too much like my mother. I cannot watch another Okike woman walk down that road." That was the line. That was the line Naomi would carry in her chest for the next 1.5 years. "She is like my mother. I cannot watch another Okike woman walk down that road." Okike was her grandmother, Adeze's maiden name, her grandmother, the woman who had loved her without conditions, the woman who had given her the ring, the one who had said, "You have it." What road? What road was her mother talking about? Naomi heard her father's voice next. Slow, tired, she heard him say, "Maybe we should give her a chance." She heard her mother say, "No." She heard her father say very quietly, "Then, what do you want to do?" She heard her mother say, "She needs to know we are serious. She needs to learn what real life is. We will pack her things tomorrow. We will give her money. We will give her time. And when she is ready to be serious, she will come home. She did not hear her father say yes. She did not hear him say no either. She heard him say nothing. And that was what hurt the most. That her father had not been the one to decide, but he had not stopped it. He had let her mother carry the plan alone, and he had stayed quiet at the kitchen table, while his only daughter was being measured for the doorstep. Naomi crept back up the stairs. She did not turn on the light in her bedroom. She lay down on her bed. She stared at the ceiling. She did not cry that night either. She just lay there, until the sky outside her window turned from black to navy to gray to the pale rose of a Boston June morning. And she understood, with a calmness that surprised her, that her own mother had decided to use her like a lesson, to put her own daughter outside in the cold, so that the cold would teach her something her mother could not. That was the morning of her 18th birthday. She came downstairs. She found the suitcase. She did not cry. She walked out the door. She did not look back. She heard the lock click behind her, and she carried that sound with her, all the way down the front steps, all the way to the bus stop, all the way to the train station, all the way to the Boston hostel where she would spend the next 3 nights. That sound would still be in her ears 3 weeks later, when she walked into a stone cottage on the western edge of Ireland. She stood in the lobby of the Boston hostel with the suitcase at her feet. A young woman behind the desk. Pink hair, a nose ring, a name tag that said Margot. "Are you booking a room, sweetie?" "Yes." How many nights? Naomi did not know how to answer. How many nights did she have exactly? She had $300. The hostel was $35 a night. That was 8 nights, if she did not eat, which she had to eat. So it was less than 8 nights, which was a number, not very many nights. 3 nights, she said, to start. She paid in cash. She got a key. She climbed up to the 3rd floor. She found her assigned bunk in a room with 7 other women. She set her suitcase against the wall. She climbed up to the top bunk. She lay down on her back. She stared at the ceiling. And finally, she cried. She cried for 2 hours, quietly, with one hand pressed over her mouth, because there were other women trying to sleep. She cried for the kitchen she had grown up in. She cried for her father, going to the bank. She cried for her grandmother, who had not lived long enough to see this. She cried for the writing program she would never attend. She cried for the cold sound of a deadbolt locking from the inside. And then she ran out of tears. It was 9 in the morning. She had not slept. She had not eaten since the day before. She had $300 to her name and no plan and no people and no place to go. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. She climbed down from the bunk. She washed her face in the shared bathroom. She put on a clean shirt, and she went downstairs to the hostel common room. She opened her laptop. She made herself a cup of bad coffee from the communal pot, and she did what she had been doing on and off for a week. She searched. She searched for cheap places to live. Studio apartments outside Boston, roommate ads on Craigslist, cleaning jobs, coffee shop jobs, bookstore jobs. Nothing fit. Not without a paycheck first. Not without references, not without a parent's signature, not without something. She closed Craigslist. She opened a new tab, and she did something she had not done in 3 days. She opened her grandmother's leather journal. It was a small journal, soft brown leather, worn at the corners. Adaeze had given it to her 2 summers before she died, right Everything in here, her grandmother had said. Write what you cannot say out loud. Naomi opened it now, to the inside back cover, where she sometimes tucked loose pages. She felt something stiff. Behind the lining, she paused. She had never noticed that before. She pressed her finger against the inside of the leather cover. There was something there. Something thin. Something folded, tucked inside the lining itself. Her hands were shaking before she even knew why. Slowly, very slowly, she worked her fingernail along the inside edge of the cover. The leather lining peeled back, just enough, and out slid a single folded piece of pale blue stationery. Naomi held it. The paper was warm from being against her skin all morning. She unfolded it. It was a letter, written in her grandmother's careful slanted English, the English of a Lagos woman who had learned the language at a convent school in 1948. My dear Naomi, if you are reading this, it means you have grown up enough to look for the corners of things. Good. The women in our family always learn to look in corners. I have asked your mother to give you this letter on the morning of your 18th birthday. If she has not given it to you, then she has her reasons. I will not blame her. She is my daughter, and I love her even when I do not understand her. But I want you to know something, granddaughter. This ring I gave you, the gold one with the turquoise stone. Look at the inside of the band. Hold it under a warm light. A yellow light, not a white one. There is something written there. I had it engraved in 1976. I never told your mother. I never told anyone. The words are in Igbo. They are for you. They have always been for you. From the moment I held you in my arms in Boston in 2007, and I looked into your face and I saw who you were, you will know what to do, my heart. You always have. Love, your grandmother. Adayeze. Naomi sat in the Boston hostel common room. She did not move. She did not breathe. A woman walked past her with a bowl of cereal. A man typed at a laptop across the room. Outside the window, a delivery truck honked its horn. Naomi did not hear any of it. She slid the ring off her finger. Her hands were trembling so hard she nearly dropped it. She held it up to the warm yellow lamp on the table beside her. She tilted it, and there, faint, almost worn away by 49 years of being on her grandmother's hand, and then 4 years on her own hand. 5 small words, in Igbo. She did not know enough Igbo to read them on her own. She typed them carefully into the translator on her phone, 1 letter at a time, squinting at the tiny engraving, checking, rechecking. The translator gave her the English. She read it. She read it again. Her hands flew up to her mouth. The English was this, for the girl brave enough to leave. She sat in the common room of the Boston hostel, with her grandmother's letter on the table in front of her, and her grandmother's ring back on her finger, and her grandmother's words inside the band where they had been waiting since 76. She had been 12 when her grandmother put that ring on her hand. Adayeze had known. Adayeze had known before Naomi was even born that this girl was going to need to leave. Adayeze had been preparing her, quietly, across an ocean, across a generation, across a language barrier so thick that Naomi's own mother could not say I love you in English without sounding like she was reciting it. Adayeze had been preparing her to go and to come home, wherever home was going to be. Naomi did not know yet, but somewhere on the far western edge of Ireland, there was a small stone cottage, crumbling, empty, roof half gone, that had been waiting for 80 years for her. The next 2 days passed in a blur. She slept. She ate cheap sandwiches from a corner store. She wandered around downtown Boston with her hands in her pockets. She avoided the parts of the city that might make her think about her parents. But mostly, she searched. She had a new search now, because something in her grandmother's letter had cracked open a door, and the door pointed away, far away, to anywhere that was not Boston. She had read once, in an old magazine, about rural property programs in Europe, places where dying villages were trying to attract new people by selling abandoned houses for almost nothing. What she did not expect to find was something in Ireland. It came up on the 5th page of search results. On the 6th night of her search, a small listing on a parish council website in County Mayo, on the western coast of Ireland. The Connolly Cottage, abandoned since 1953, located near a village called Achill Sound. The parish council, according to the listing, was offering the cottage at a symbolic price of €1 to anyone willing to commit to restoration and to register as a parish resident. There were conditions. The buyer had to live on the property. The buyer had to respect the cultural significance of the building. The buyer had to be approved by the parish council. €1, about $1.10 in American money. A stone cottage in Ireland, a country her grandmother had loved without ever visiting. Her grandmother had read all of Seamus Heaney. Her grandmother had owned a small dog-eared paperback of Edna O'Brien's letters that she had carried with her on every trip from Lagos to Boston for 30 years. Naomi sat in the Boston hostel. She read the listing 4 times, and she touched the ring on her right index finger. For the girl brave enough to leave, she booked a standby flight to Dublin that night. It cost her $212. She had $86 left. She closed the laptop. She climbed into her top bunk in the women's dorm. She lay on her back. She looked at the ceiling. She was not afraid. That was the strangest part. For the first time in her life, Naomi Achebe was not afraid. 3 days later, she was sitting on a train rolling west across the Irish countryside. The fields outside the window were impossibly green. Stone walls cut the green into small, even squares. Sheep dotted the hillsides like loose punctuation. The sky was the soft, uncertain gray of a country where the weather changed every 15 minutes. She had landed in Dublin at 6:30 in the morning. She had taken a bus from the airport to the train station. She had bought a ticket to Westport with the last of her cash. She had not eaten since the plane. She watched Ireland slide past her window. She held the ring on her finger, and she did not feel like an 18-year-old American girl who had been thrown out of her house. She felt like a daughter of a grandmother who had known. The train pulled into Westport just after 2 in the afternoon. The town was bright and colorful and full of seagulls, stone bridges, painted shop fronts, the smell of salt and bread. Naomi found the small local bus that ran twice a day out to Achill Sound. She bought a ticket. She climbed aboard. The beer rattled west. The land changed. It got wilder, emptier, lonelier. The stone walls stopped. The sheep got fewer. The hills opened up into long, bare green slopes that ran down to the Atlantic. The driver let her off in a place that did not really look like a village. 3 houses, a small parish church, a post office the size of a closet, a pub called Mulligan's. The wind was coming in off the ocean, steady, cold, full of the smell of salt and heather and something sweet she could not identify. She stood in the road with her suitcase beside her. She had crossed an ocean, for a €1 stone cottage. She did not know yet that she was about to be welcomed by a woman who had been waiting 22 years to meet her. She walked toward the parish church. The parish council office was a small whitewashed building beside it. The door was open. A bell rang softly when she stepped inside. A woman was sitting behind a wooden desk. She was in her 60s, curly gray hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. A framed photograph of the Virgin Mary on the wall behind her, a teacup steaming gently on the desk. She looked up. She saw Naomi standing in the doorway. Suitcase, tote bag, the face of a girl who had crossed an ocean. The woman set down her pen. Very slowly. She took her glasses off. She studied Naomi for a long, quiet moment, and then she said in the soft singing accent of County Mayo, "You came about the Connolly place, didn't you?" Pet Naomi could not speak. She just nodded. The woman closed her eyes for a second, like she was saying a small private prayer of thanks. Then she opened them, and she smiled, with the kind of smile that did not belong to strangers. "I have been waiting for you," she said. "I just did not know your name yet." She stood up. She came around the desk. She reached into her own purse. She pulled out a single euro coin. Bright, worn, catching the afternoon light from the window. "My name is Royshin Gallagher. I have been clerk of this parish for 22 years, and in all that time, nobody has ever come from America for a euro cottage, so I am going to put this in the box for you. You keep your money for food." She closed Naomi's hand around the coin. She held it there. "Welcome to Ack Hill," she said. "I hope this is the place you were looking for." The walk from the parish office to the Connolly cottage was 3 miles. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon when Naomi started. The road narrowed. The road turned to gravel. The gravel turned to a grassy path between 2 stone walls. Sheep watched her from the fields. A small flock of magpies called from a blackthorn hedge. The wind came in steady from the Atlantic. She could hear waves now, distant, steady, the sound of an ocean breathing. She walked. She did not feel tired. She did not feel afraid. She just walked, with her suitcase rolling behind her on the uneven path, and her grandmother's ring on her finger, and the parish clerk's euro coin in her pocket. She came up over a rise in the land, and she stopped. The cottage was below her, small, maybe 25 feet long, built of rough gray field stones, the mortar crumbling in places. A single tall stone chimney rising from the center. One side of the chimney fallen away, the slate roof patched with moss, a section sagging where the timbers had given out. Wild roses had grown thick along the south wall. Foxglove rose in pale spikes through the long grass. A wooden gate leaned against the stone wall at the edge of the path, tilted but still standing, and beyond the cottage, in every direction, the green hills of West Ireland rolled away, down, toward the Atlantic. The water beyond was a wide, unbroken silver gray, the kind of color that does not exist anywhere else on earth. Naomi stood on the rise. She looked at the cottage. She did not move. She did not speak. She just looked. And after a long time, she walked down the path toward the heavy oak front door. The door was ajar, hanging on rusted iron hinges that had held it for over 150 years. She pushed it open. It groaned, but it held. She stepped inside. The interior was a single room, flagstone floor, rough stone walls, open rafters above. a small square window on either side of the door, and at the north end of the room, the hearth. It was massive. It took up almost the entire north wall, an enormous stone fireplace big enough to stand inside, an iron crane still hanging from a hook on the inner wall, the kind that had once held cooking pots over a fire. The stones around the firebox blackened by a century of smoke. Naomi walked toward it slowly. The flagstones were uneven under her boots. The air inside the cottage was cool and still, and smelled faintly of old stone and ash and the sea. In front of the hearth, the flagstones grew larger. A single great flat stone about 5 feet wide and 3 feet deep sat directly in front of the firebox. The hearth stone. Naomi knelt down in front of it. She placed her palm flat on the stone. The stone was cold. She closed her eyes for one long, quiet moment. The only sound in the cottage was the distant wash of the Atlantic, and then, very faintly, from the village below, the bell of the parish church began to ring. The afternoon Angelus, the bell that rings at 6 o'clock in every Catholic parish in Ireland. A bell that had been ringing in this valley every day for over 100 years, through famine, through war, through every generation that had lived and died and left this cottage behind. The bell rang. Naomi knelt on the flagstones with her palm flat on the hearthstone of a house she had paid €1 for. And as somewhere, under the great flat stone where her hand was resting, less than a foot beneath her, something that a woman had hidden 80 years ago was about to be found. The bell from the village kept ringing. 6 slow strokes, then silence. She did not move her hand from the hearthstone, because she had felt something just before the bell started. A gap, a small clean gap along the edge of the stone where it met the surrounding flagstones. She had been so still, she had almost missed it. She moved her hand now, slowly, tracing the edge of the great flat stone with her fingertips, brushing aside decades of soft gray ash that had settled into the seam. The edge was smooth, not broken, not cracked, smooth, the way a stone is smooth when it has been cut to lift. Naomi sat back on her heels. Her heart was doing something strange, not racing, the opposite, slowing, each beat clearer than the last, as if her body was telling her to pay attention. She pressed down on one edge of the hearthstone. Nothing. She pressed down on the opposite edge. The stone rocked, just slightly, just enough, just the smallest sigh of a stone that was not mortared, that was resting on something. Naomi sat there in the deepening afternoon light, and she said the only thing she could think to say, out loud, quietly, to nobody, "Grandma." She got up, she went outside, she walked around the side of the cottage where the wild roses had grown thick along the south wall. There was rusted iron leaning against the stone, the remains of an old gate, or a fence post. She did not know which, she did not care. She picked up the longest piece, a bar of dark iron, about 4 feet long, heavy in her hand, rust crumbling off in flakes. She carried it back inside. She wedged one end into the gap along the edge of the hearthstone. She leaned her weight on the other end. Nothing. She leaned harder. The stone moaned. The iron bar bent in her hands. Her boot slipped on the flagstone. She nearly fell. She stopped. She caught her breath. She braced one foot against the base of the hearth itself. She pushed with her whole body. The hearthstone lifted, slowly. 2 inches, 4 inches, 6. She held it. Her arms were shaking. She could see beneath it now, just barely. A cavity, a space, A small rectangular chamber lined with flat stones on all sides, about 2 feet wide, maybe 3 feet long, maybe 2 feet deep, lined. A human being had built this. Inside the cavity, she saw something, a bundle wrapped in dark, heavy cloth. She lowered the hearthstone back down, carefully, so carefully, because if she dropped it, it would crack, and she did not want to be the woman who cracked the stone that had held this secret for 80 years. The stone settled with a small, dull thump. Naomi sat back on the flagstones. She was breathing hard. The world had narrowed to a single room, a single hearth, a single 18-year-old girl, and whatever was waiting underneath her. She did not open it that day. She would think about that later. How she did not just rip the stone up and tear into the bundle. She did not, because something inside her, something deep, something her grandmother had put there years ago, said no, not yet, not like this, not alone in a cottage with the light going. This thing under the hearth had waited 80 years. It could wait one more night. She walked back to the village. She booked a room at Mulligan's pub for €25 a night. The room was small, wooden floor, an iron bed, a single window looking out at the road, a wash basin in the corner. She sat in the pub downstairs and she ate a plate of shepherd's pie, the first hot meal she had eaten in 4 days. She wrote in her journal for an hour. The old men at the bar watched the television, glanced at her, nodded, looked away. She did not feel out of place. She slept that night the way she had not slept in 3 weeks. She slept like a person who had finally arrived somewhere. She came back to the cottage at 9 the next morning. The light inside the single room was warmer now. The flagstones glowed faintly. The hearth looked less like a mouth and more like a place where a fire had once burned. She knelt in front of the hearth. She used the iron bar again. She lifted the hearthstone. This time she had a piece of firewood ready to brace under one edge. The stone held. She did not have to support it with her body. She reached down into the cavity. She lifted out the bundle. It was heavy, heavier than it looked. The cloth was oilcloth, old, dark, tied with heavy waxed string. The string was still strong. She carried the bundle to the wooden shelf above the mantel. She set it down carefully. She untied the string with her fingers. She unfolded the oilcloth, and inside, there were 4 things: a small tin box with a hinged lid, a leather-bound book, a wooden rosary, and a small, worn pocket Bible. Naomi sat down on the flagstones in front of the hearth. She did not stand up. She did not move to a chair. She just sat, cross-legged, on the cold stone floor, with the 4 objects laid out on the floor in front of her. She picked up the tin box first. The lid was painted with faded flowers. The hinges still worked. Inside, wrapped in 2 layers of waxed paper, were small gold objects. Jewelry. Old jewelry. The kind a person leaves behind only when they truly believe they are not coming back. A pair of earrings, set with small dark garnets. A thin gold chain with a small cross pendant. A ring with a single blue stone. A gold locket on a chain. Naomi opened the locket with the edge of her fingernail. Inside, 2 tiny black and white photographs. A man with dark hair and a thick mustache. A woman in a pale wedding dress with flowers in her hair. Both of them looking solemnly into the camera, the way people did in old photographs. The faces of strangers. Strangers who had owned this house. Naomi closed the locket, gently, like she was closing a small door. She set the tin box aside. She picked up the rosary next. Simple, dark wooden beads. A small brass crucifix. The wood smooth from many years of fingers. She held it in her palm. The wood was warmer than she expected. She set it down beside the tin box. Then she picked up the leather book. She opened it slowly. The pages were thick paper, soft from age. The writing was in faded ink, once black, now brown. The handwriting was small, careful, the handwriting of a woman who had been taught to write properly by Catholic nuns. The first entry was dated October 1939. Naomi began to read. Bridget Connolly. My husband Liam and I are leaving Achill Island tonight. We are going to England to help with the war. Liam has joined up with the British Army. Foolish man that he is, but he says he cannot sit still while the world burns. I will work in a hospital in Birmingham. I do not know if we will come back. I am hiding this book and our savings and the few pieces of jewelry that have been in our families for generations beneath the hearthstone, where my grandmother used to hide things during the black and tan days. If we return, we will reclaim what is here. If we do not return, let this remain hidden until it is needed by whoever finds it. The hearth holds what the heart cannot carry. Naomi stopped. She read that last line again. The hearth holds what the heart cannot carry. She set her palm flat on the flagstone beside her. She breathed. The cottage was very quiet. She kept reading. Bridget had come back to the cottage once in 1942. She had added money to the cavity. Liam is in North Africa. I pray every night. In 1944, she had returned again. Liam is in France. I have not heard from him in 6 weeks. They say this is normal now. In 1945, there was a short, brutal entry. Liam is dead. Killed in Germany in March. I will go on. And then, after that, 8 years of silence. The pages stayed blank. Until 1953. The last entry. I am leaving the cottage for the final time today. I am moving to America to live with my cousin in New York. I am 43 years old. There is nothing left for me in Achill. Liam is gone. Our parents are gone. The farm does not pay, and my hands are not strong enough for the work anymore. I am leaving everything beneath the hearthstone, as I left it, during the war. I do not have the heart to dig it up. The jewelry belonged to Liam's mother and grandmother. The money is what we saved before the war. Plus my hospital wages during the war. Plus what was left of Liam's army pension. I leave it for whoever finds this cottage next. Whoever you are, you will be a stranger to me. But not to this place. The cottage will know you if you deserve to stay. I hope it knows you well. Bridget Connolly, April 1953. Naomi closed the journal. She did not move for a long time. She picked up the pocket Bible last. She opened the cover. There was a name written in pencil on the inside. Bridget Marie Connolly, born 1910. Married St. Patrick's Church, Achill, 1933. Naomi closed the Bible. She held it against her chest, and she sat on the flagstones in the empty cottage of a woman who had hidden this for 80 years. And she said softly to nobody, "I'm here." There was a cloth pouch she had not noticed before. It was tucked deep in the bottom of the oilcloth bundle, folded into one of the layers. She almost missed it. Naomi opened it carefully. Inside was money, old Irish punts, British pound notes, folded carefully, bundled with yarn that had once been pale yellow and was now the color of old straw. Notes from the 1940s, the 1950s. Naomi counted them slowly. She did not know what they were worth. She suspected, the way you suspect something without yet having confirmation. that some of these notes were worth far more as collector's pieces than their face value. She rewrapped the money, the jewelry, the journal, the rosary, the bell. She carried the bundle outside. She locked the door of the cottage behind her with the old iron key Roy Shin Gallagher had given her at the parish office. She walked the 3 miles back to the village. She did not let the bundle out of her sight. She did not let her hand off the strap of the canvas bag. The next morning she took the bus to Westport. Roy Sheen had given her the name of a solicitor, a thoughtful woman named Oyvind Kennedy, who specialized in rural property matters. Oyvind's office was above a hardware store on a narrow side street. The stairs creaked. The door had a brass bell. Oyvind was in her late 40s. Reading glasses, a blue cardigan, a neat office that smelled faintly of lemon polish. Naomi set the canvas bag on her desk. She told her the story. Oyvind listened without interrupting. She did not write anything down at first. She just listened. The way a person listens when they want to hear a thing the right way the first time. When Naomi finished, Oyvind nodded, slowly. Then she said one word. "Show me." Naomi opened the bag. She set the journal on the desk first, then the tin box, then the rosary, then the Bible, then the cloth pouch of old money. Oyvind looked at all of it. She did not touch anything yet. She pulled on a thin pair of cotton gloves first. Oyvind read the journal entries with great care. She turned the pages slowly. She did not speak for almost an hour. The office was very quiet. The only sound was the soft turning of paper and a clock ticking on the wall behind her. When Oyvind finished, she set the journal down. She took off her glasses. She looked at Naomi for a long moment. "Naomi, listen to me carefully." "Yes, ma'am. Under Irish property law, the contents of a property belong to the registered owner of that property. You are the registered owner." Bridget Connolly clearly wrote her intention that whoever found this cottage next was to receive what she left behind. Legally, this is yours. Morally, this is yours. Naomi could not speak. Oyvind continued. "That said, I would like to do some due diligence to see if Bridget Connolly had any living heirs. Not because we have to. We do not. But because it is the right thing to do. Are you willing to let me make a few calls?" "Yes, good. Then leave this with me for a week. I will keep it locked in the safe, and I will see what I can find." Naomi nodded. She started to gather the items back into the bag. Oyvind stopped her with a gentle hand. "You can take the journal home. It was hers, but now it is yours. You should be able to read it as many times as you want." Naomi held the journal against her chest. She walked out of the solicitor's office into the bright Westport afternoon. She bought a sandwich at a small shop. She ate it sitting on a bench beside the river. She read the journal a third time. Slower now, she let every word land. The week passed quickly. Oyvind called her on a Thursday. Her voice on the phone was soft. "Naomi, I have news." "Yes." Bridget Connolly died in New York in 1978. She had no children. She had no surviving relatives that I have been able to find. She lived with a cousin until that cousin also died in 1971. After that, she lived alone in a small apartment in Brooklyn. She worked as a hospital aide until her retirement. She is buried in Holy Cross Cemetery in Brooklyn. There is no one left. Naomi stood in the small hallway of Mulligan's pub with the phone pressed to her ear. Nobody. Bridget Connolly had nobody, and now she had Naomi. So Oyvind said, "Everything is yours." Naomi closed her eyes. She thought of an old woman in a Brooklyn apartment, eating dinner alone, with the gold ring of a husband who had died in Germany sitting in a box she would never open. and a hospital aid's paycheck, and a small pension, and a memory of a cottage she had walked away from when she was 43. "Thank you," Naomi said. "Come see me Monday," Oivin said. "We will talk about what to do next." That weekend, Naomi made decisions. She sold 2 pieces of the jewelry first, the locket and the garnet earrings, to an antiques dealer in Galway named Mr. Fitzgerald. He held the pieces under a jeweler's loupe for almost 20 minutes before he made an offer. When he made it, his voice was careful, like a man who was being fair on purpose. The locket alone, he said, was probably late Victorian. The garnets in the earrings were bohemian. He offered her €11,000 for the locket and the earrings together. Naomi felt her hands go cold. She had never held that much money in her life. She took the offer. She did not sell the ring with the blue stone, or the gold chain with the cross pendant. She kept those. The blue stone ring she put on a small gold chain. Beside her, Grandmother Adayez's ring. Around her neck, under her shirt, 2 rings from 2 women who had each loved her enough to leave her something. The old currency she took to a coin and currency dealer in Dublin, a small, dusty shop near Trinity College. A man with white hair who breathed loudly and squinted at everything through a magnifying glass. He gave her €4,800 for the bundle. She walked out of the shop in Dublin with the money in an envelope inside her tote bag. She walked across the Liffey. She stood on the bridge for a long time. She looked at the water. She did not feel rich. She felt held by a woman she had never met. The restoration began in late August. Naomi hired a stonemason from a village about 10 miles away. His name was Tadg Moran. He was 60 years old. Stocky, white hair, hands like 2 old leather gloves. He had been restoring traditional Irish cottages for 40 years. He charged a fair rate. He arrived for the first visit on a Tuesday morning with his son and a battered Ford pickup truck and a thermos of black tea. He walked the cottage in silence for 15 minutes. He ran his hands along the stone walls. He pressed his shoulder against the doorframe. He climbed up onto the roof and crawled across the slates. He came back down. He stood in the middle of the single room. He looked at the great hearth. He nodded slowly. "She's sound, this one. The walls are perfect. The roof needs work, but the bones are there. Old hands built this. Real hands." Naomi did not know what to say to that. She just nodded back. Tadg drank his tea standing up. He looked at her. "You're staying, then?" "Yes." "All winter, yes. By yourself, yes." He nodded again. He did not say anything for a long moment. Then he said the thing she would remember. "My father told me about this place when I was a boy. He said the woman who lived here was the most kind-hearted person he had ever known. He said she lost her husband in the war. He said she went to America in '53. He said the cottage had been waiting for the right person to come back." Naomi felt something rise in her throat. She could not speak. Tadg drank the last of his tea. He set the thermos cup back on the lid. "Looks like the cottage was right," he said. "And we have work to do." The roof came first. Tadg and his son replaced the missing slates and repaired the sagging section. They sourced reclaimed slate from a yard in Connemara. The work took 2 weeks. The sound of hammering filled the valley. The chimney came next. The fallen section had to be rebuilt, stone by stone. Tadg taught Naomi how to mix the traditional lime mortar. Not modern cement. Lime. The kind of mortar the original builders had used 150 years ago. the kind that breathed with the stone instead of trapping moisture against it. She learned to mix it, stir it, test it for consistency. She got it on her clothes, in her hair, under her fingernails. She did not care. The interior was her work, mostly. She scrubbed the flagstones on her knees with a brush and a bucket of soapy water, day after day, until the stone glowed silver-gray under the lamplight. She scrubbed the walls. She cleaned the great hearth. She brushed decades of ash out of the firebox with a stiff broom. She filled bucket after bucket. She carried them outside. She emptied them into the long grass. She ordered glass for the 2 windows from a glazier in Westport. She rebuilt the simple wooden shelves above the mantel. She oiled them with linseed oil. The smell filled the cottage for a week. She bought an iron bed at an estate sale in Castle Bar, a wooden table, 2 chairs. She hung curtains she sewed by hand from a bolt of natural linen. She set the journal on the mantel. Beside it, the rosary, the bull, the locket photograph of Bridget and Liam, the cross pendant, the remaining pieces of jewelry that she had not sold, a small altar to a woman who had once lived here. The trouble started in early October. A knock at the door. Late afternoon. Naomi opened it. A man was standing on the path, about 35 years old, tall, dark coat, a leather folio under one arm, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Are you the American girl?" "Yes. My name is Eamon Doyle. I think we need to talk." She did not let him inside. She stepped out onto the path. She closed the door behind her. She crossed her arms. He smiled wider. "I am Bridget Connolly's great-nephew. I have come to talk to you about the property." Naomi did not move. Inside her, a cold, quiet thing settled into place. Bridget Connolly had no surviving relatives, she said. "We checked." "Ah," he said. "Well, you missed one. Me." He opened the folio. He pulled out papers, several pages, family tree diagrams, birth certificates, a photocopied marriage certificate. He held them out to her. "You see, my grandmother was Bridget's first cousin once removed. We have title. We have always had title. The parish council should never have sold this cottage. They certainly should not have sold it for a single euro to an American." The way he said the word American, like it was a slur. Naomi took the papers from him. She did not look at them yet. She looked at him. "I'm calling my solicitor," she said. "By all means," he said. He smiled again. "I am sure you will see reason. It would be much easier on everyone if you simply sign the cottage back over to the family. We can compensate you for your time. Say, 3,000 euros for your trouble." She did not answer. She turned around. She went inside. She locked the door behind her. She called Oivin from the cottage's new landline. Oivin picked up on the second ring. Naomi told her everything in 2 minutes. There was a long pause on the line. Then Oivin said, in a very calm voice, "Naomi, listen to me. Do not sign anything. Do not give him a single piece of information about yourself. Read me the names on those papers." Naomi read them out. The pause this time was longer. Then Oivin said, very softly, "That family tree is fake. That marriage certificate is from a real person. But it was not Bridget Connolly's cousin. It is a name he has copied from public records." "How do you know?" "Because I have seen Eamon Doyle's name before." "What?" "He did the same thing in Donegal 2 years ago to an elderly Dutch woman who bought a €1 property from another parish council. He convinced her she was being sued by the family. She signed the cottage over to him for €4,000 to make the lawsuit go away. There was no lawsuit. He was no Umley. He sold the cottage to a developer 6 months later for $90,000. Naomi sat down on the flagstone floor in front of the hearth. Her legs had stopped working. What do I do? Nothing, Awifin said. You call the Garda. You give them the papers he gave you. You let them do the rest. Naomi called the Garda Síochána that evening. Eamon Doyle was arrested 4 days later in a hotel in Sligo. The papers he had given Naomi were forgeries. He had 2 outstanding warrants in 2 different counties. He had been doing this for years, targeting old women, targeting foreign buyers, targeting anyone who looked like they would not push back. He had not expected the 18-year-old American girl to call her solicitor before she gave him a single answer. When Naomi heard on the phone from the Garda detective, she did not feel triumphant. She felt tired. She also felt something else, something her grandmother had once tried to teach her without ever quite saying it out loud. You can trust people. But trust is not the same as believing everything. The world had Tadgs and Roysines and Oivins in it, and it had Aemons. You had to learn the difference. You had to learn it without becoming the kind of woman who locks the door against everyone. October turned into November. The Atlantic light went silver, then iron, then pewter. The wind picked up. The wild roses by the south wall went brown. The foxgloves dropped their last petals. A neighbor came up the path one afternoon. An old farmer in a flat cap, Wellington boots. He was carrying a sack over one shoulder. He stopped in front of the cottage. He looked at her standing in the doorway. Cormac Burke, he said. I live a mile down the road. I knew Bridget when I was a child. I brought you peat for the fire. He set the sack down. Naomi looked at him. She felt her throat get tight. Thank you. He nodded. Winter's coming. You'll be cold. I will pay you for it. He waved his hand, as if he was waving away a fly. The cottage paid me a long time ago, he said. He turned around. He walked back down the path. She watched him go. She closed the door slowly. She did not understand what he had meant. She would. Later, Saturday afternoons became Nora Sweeney. Nora was 88 years old. She lived in a stone house 1.5 miles down the road. She had been born in this valley. She had never lived anywhere else. She had been a girl of 8 when Bridget Connolly came home from England in 1945. She walked every Saturday, the 1.5 miles. She came in the front door of the cottage without knocking. She kissed Naomi on the cheek. She sat in the wooden chair Naomi had set beside the hearth. Naomi made tea, and Nora talked. She talked about the Achill of her childhood, the thatched roofs, the horse fairs, the way the women would walk to the well together in the early morning, the Latin Mass in the village church, the smell of turf smoke on a winter evening. And she talked about Bridget. She was tall, your Bridget. Taller than most of the women here. Quiet, like you. Loved that husband of hers like nothing I have ever seen. She and Liam used to walk along the cliffs together in the evening, holding hands like they were the only 2 people in the world. When did she lose him? Nora paused. She looked into the fire. Officially, 45 in Germany. That is what we were told. Officially, Nora did not answer that. Not yet. She sipped her tea. She changed the subject. Naomi noticed. Naomi did not push. It would be another month before Nora was ready to tell her the truth. In mid-November, Tag came back to do the last of the work on the second cottage wall, the interior side, the wall that ran along the west side of the great hearth. He was tapping his way along it, listening, the way old stonemasons listen. He stopped. He tapped again. He frowned. He called Naomi over. "Listen to this," he said. He tapped a stone in the wall about 3 feet to the left of the hearth opening. The sound was hollow. He tapped the stone beside it. Solid. He tapped the hollow stone again. He looked at Naomi. "There's a void behind that." "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's a space, a cavity, behind that stone." Naomi felt her heart begin to do that strange, slowing thing again. The same thing it had done the first day, with the hearthstone. "Can we open it?" Todd looked at her. "Lass, this is your cottage. We can do whatever you want." He spent the rest of the afternoon working that stone loose. It was not mortared in the modern way. It was set into the wall with the same kind of lime mortar he had been using. But the lime around this particular stone was older, drier, as if it had been replaced once, long ago, by human hands, for a reason. When the stone finally came free, Todd lifted it down carefully. He set it on the flagstone floor. He stepped back. He gestured with one hand. "She left this for you, not for me. You look." Naomi knelt at the wall. She reached into the cavity. Inside, she pulled out a small bundle, smaller than the first one, wrapped in dark blue silk, tied with a fine ribbon. She set it on the floor. She untied the ribbon. She unfolded the silk. Inside were 2 things. A small silver crucifix on a delicate silver chain, worn smooth, as if someone had held it in their hand a great many times, and a packet of letters. A bundle of envelopes tied with twine, brown with age. The handwriting on the outside of every envelope was the same handwriting from the journal, Bridget Connolly's handwriting. But these letters had never been sent. There were no addresses on the envelopes, just a single word written across the front of each one. Liam. Naomi sat back on her heels. She picked up the crucifix. She held it in her hand. Todd was standing very still behind her. After a long moment, he said, quietly, "Lass. Yes, you should call old Nora Sweeney before you open those." Why, Todd did not answer at first. He looked at the bundle of letters on the floor. He looked at the silver crucifix in her hand. He looked at the woman in the locket photograph on the mantel. Then he said, in a voice that was much softer than his usual voice, "Because some stories, the ones from the old days, they were never put down on paper because nobody could bear to write them. And those letters looked to me like a woman who finally had to." He put on his cap. He picked up his tools. "I will see myself out, lass. Call Nora." He left. Naomi sat alone on the flagstone floor in front of the hearth. The fire was burning low. The light was going. The Atlantic wind was rising outside. The wild roses scraped softly against the south window. In her hand, a silver crucifix. On the floor in front of her, a bundle of letters that had never been sent. To a man who had died in Germany, in March of 1945, according to the journal. She set the crucifix down on top of the bundle. She did not open the letters. Not yet. She went to the table. She picked up the phone. She dialed Nora Sweeney's number. The old woman answered on the third ring. "Hello, pet." "Nora, yes. I found something. Behind the wall. By the hearth. Todd said I should call you before I open it." There was a long silence on the line. It was so long Naomi thought the call had dropped. Then Nora spoke. Her voice was steady, but there was something behind it. Something that had been waiting 80 years to be said. "Pet, Put the kettle on. I will come now. Naomi looked out the window. The light over the Atlantic was almost gone. The wind was strong. The first scattered drops of rain were starting to hit the glass. She heard her own voice, very small. Nora, it's getting dark. The walk is too far. I'll come to you. No, Nora said. This is a story that has to be told in that cottage, in front of that hearth, where it happened. I have been waiting 80 years to tell it. I am coming, pet. Put the kettle on. Naomi set the phone down. She walked back to the hearth. She added 2 pieces of peat to the fire. The peat caught slowly. The warmth came up. She sat down on the flagstones in front of the fire. She placed her hand on the bundle of letters. She did not open them. She waited, outside. The wind picked up off the Atlantic. The first true rain of the winter began to fall against the slate roof. The cottage was warm. The cottage was holding. The cottage was about to give up its last secret. Nora Sweeney arrived 40 minutes later. She came up the path in a long wool coat, a scarf knotted at her throat, a walking stick in one hand. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her hair was damp from the rain. She did not knock. She opened the door. She stepped inside. She closed it behind her. She set the walking stick against the wall. She looked at Naomi. She looked at the bundle of letters on the floor. She looked at the silver crucifix beside it. Then she walked over, very slowly, 88 years old and walking like a woman half her age. She knelt, with effort, on the flagstones in front of the hearth, beside Naomi. She placed one hand on top of the letters. She closed her eyes. She crossed herself. Then she said, in a voice that was much smaller than her usual voice, I am the only one left who knows. Naomi did not speak. She just listened. The rain was on the slate roof. The fire was low. The cottage was warm. The world had narrowed to 2 women on a stone floor. 118, 188, one holding a bundle of letters, the other holding 80 years of silence. Nora opened her eyes. She looked at Naomi. Pet, she said, Liam Connolly did not die in Germany. The fire popped softly. Naomi did not move. He came home, Nora said. In June of 1945, he came home alive, with a discharge paper and a duffel bag and a face I did not recognize. I was 8 years old. I watched him walk down this same path. Bridget ran out of the cottage to meet him. She fell on her knees in front of him on the road. She wept. She thanked God. She thanked Mary. She thanked every saint she could name. He just stood there, looking down at her, like a man looking down a well. Naomi felt her chest tighten. Shell shock, Nora said. That is what we called it then. They had not invented the other word yet. He had been in Africa. He had been in France. He had been in Germany. He had seen things a boy from Achill Island was never made to see. He had carried things back inside himself that he could not put down. He never spoke about it, not once. Not to her, not to anyone. Naomi's hand was on the bundle of letters now. And so for 7 years, Nora said. 7 years. Bridget and Liam lived in this cottage. And the cottage was a quiet hell. Naomi's eyes filled. She did not wipe them. She let them fall. Nora went on. He drank. Not always, but often. He had black moods that came down on him like weather. He could go 3 days without saying a word. He could shout the roof off the next day over a spilled cup of tea. He never lifted a hand to her at first. But it came. It came in the 5th year. She would walk down to the village some mornings, with marks she tried to hide under her scarf. Everyone saw. Nobody said anything. That is what we did in those days. We saw, and we did not say, "God forgive us." Naomi reached out. She put her hand on top of Nora's hand. The old woman did not move her own hand. She just kept talking, quietly, steadily, as if she had practiced this in her head for 80 years. Bridget never stopped loving him. That is the thing nobody understands. She loved the man who came home, even though that man was not the man who had left. She loved him because she had promised God she would love him, and because somewhere inside the man who came home, there was still the boy who used to walk along the cliffs with her, holding her hand, like they were the only two people in the world. She believed she could love him back into himself. She tried, pet, she tried. The fire shifted. A piece of peat fell. Sparks went up. In January of 1952, Nora said, Liam went up into the hills behind the cottage one morning before light. He did not come back. Naomi closed her eyes. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The rain on the slate roof was the only sound for a long moment. Bridget found him 3 days later, with Father Brennan from the parish. The priest was the one who carried the body down. And then Nora said, Bridget did the bravest thing I have ever seen a human being do. Naomi opened her eyes. She walked into the parish church. She stood in front of Father Brennan, and she said, Father, my husband died from his war wounds. They came back on him in the hills. I want him buried in the church grounds. And Father Brennan looked at her. And he looked at her for a long time. Because he knew. Of course he knew. The whole valley knew. And he said, Yes, Bridget, he died of his war wounds. Tell me where to dig. He buried Liam in consecrated ground. In 1952, when the church would not have done it, because Bridget loved her husband enough to lie for his soul, and because Father Brennan loved his parishioner enough to lie with her. Naomi was crying now, quietly, with her shoulders shaking, and the journal, she whispered. The journal said, he died in Germany. Yes, Nora said. Why? The old woman turned her face toward the fire. She watched the small flames for a long moment. Then she said, very softly, because she did not want whoever came next, whoever found this cottage, to inherit the pain along with the jewelry. Naomi pressed both hands to her face. She wrote the prettiest story, Nora said. On purpose. She left her gold and her notes and her rosary, and she left the prettiest story on top of all of it, because she had carried the real one alone for 13 years, and she did not want to put it on a stranger. The day she left this cottage, April of 1953, she walked down to the village church. She knelt in front of the statue of the Blessed Mother, and she prayed for 3 hours. I was 16 by then. I was kneeling in the back of the church. I had come in out of the rain. I watched her. She prayed for the next person who would find this place. She prayed that whoever it was, whoever in the world it was, would come here when they needed it, and that the cottage would be a kinder house to them than it had been to her. Naomi reached out blindly, with both hands, and she gathered Nora Sweeney into her arms, and the 88-year-old woman and the 18-year-old girl held each other on the flagstone floor in front of the hearth, while the rain fell on the slates, and the fire burned low, and the wind came in off the Atlantic, and 80 years of silence finally lifted. Naomi did not open the letters that night. She set them on the mantel, beside the journal, beside the rosary, beside the silver crucifix, beside the Bible, beside the small altar that had been growing there for weeks. She drove Nora home in a borrowed car, slowly, through the rain. They did not speak on the drive. They did not need to. When Naomi got back, she sat in front of the hearth. She added more peat to the fire. She watched it burn for a long time. Then she took out her journal, and she began to write. She wrote until 2 in the morning. She wrote her first real poem. She titled it, "The Woman Who Hid Her Grief Beneath the Hearth." The Atlantic storm hit in late November. Naomi had heard people in the village talk about it for 2 days. The forecast was bad. The weather was coming in straight off the open ocean. The winds were going to be brutal. She stocked up. She bought extra peat from Cormac. She filled the oil lamps. She bought candles. She brought in extra water from the well. She thought she was ready. She was not ready. The storm hit on a Thursday night. The wind came howling in across the Atlantic like a freight train made of weather. The cottage shook. Not the walls. The walls held. The air inside the cottage seemed to shake, like the storm was a living thing pressing against every window. The power went out at 9 in the evening. The whole valley, black. Naomi sat in front of the hearth with 2 oil lamps burning and the peat fire low. She thought she would be fine. She thought it would be 1 night. It was 3 days. The wind did not stop. It blew for 72 hours. Trees came down. The road to the village washed out in 2 places. Cormac's barn lost its roof. A telephone pole down by the church snapped at the base. The electricity people could not get up the road. Nobody could. She was alone. In a cottage, in a storm, in a country where she had no family, no mother, no father, no phone signal, no light except oil lamps, no heat except peat. By the second night, she had a fever. She did not know where it came from. She suspected the cold, the wet, the exhaustion, the lifting of 80 years of someone else's grief. It started in her chest. By midnight on the second night, she was burning. She wrapped herself in 2 wool blankets. She kept the fire going by feel because her vision was going strange. She lay on the iron bed with her face turned toward the hearth, and the wind kept coming and coming and coming and would not stop. She thought, "This is how Bridget felt. This must have been some of it. This kind of alone." She thought about her mother. She had not thought about her mother in months. Not really. Not with the part of her chest that still hurt. She thought about her now. She thought about the kitchen in Brookline. She thought about the way her mother had smelled when she came home from a hospital shift. Like soap and something clean. She thought about being 7 years old, with a fever just like this one, and her mother sitting on the edge of her bed, with a cool washcloth, singing softly in Igbo. Naomi. She heard her own voice say it out loud. Mommy. She had not called her mother that since she was 9 years old. She lay in the iron bed in the cottage in the storm, and she said the word mommy into the dark, and nobody answered. She picked up Bridget's rosary from the mantel beside the bed. She did not know the prayers. She did not know how to say a Hail Mary. She did not know the order of the mysteries, but her grandmother had prayed, in Igbo, every night, by her bed when Naomi was small. Naomi remembered the sound, not the words, the sound. She held the wooden beads in her hand, and she began to say, in Igbo, the few prayers she had memorized from her grandmother's mouth. She said them over and over. She drifted in and out. She did not know if it was night or day. On the morning of the 4th day, there was a knock on the door. It was not really a knock. It was a fist, banging. She tried to get up. She could not. The door opened anyway. Cormac Burke came in. His coat was soaked. His face was raw with cold. He took one look at her on the bed, and he said one word. Right. He turned. He went out. He came back 10 minutes later with Nora Sweeney, who had walked through the storm, at 88 years old, from her own house, wrapped in 3 blankets and her late husband's wool coat. Nora put her hand on Naomi's forehead. She turned to Cormac. Get the doctor. Take my car. The road is open as far as the village now. He went. Nora sat down on the edge of the iron bed. She did not say anything. She just held Naomi's hand. And softly, very softly, she began to pray. In Irish, the old language, the way her grandmother had prayed by her bed when she was a girl. Naomi did not understand the words, but the sound was the same. The sound was the same as her grandmother Adaeze praying in Igbo by a small bed in a Brookline house in 2012. 2 grandmothers praying in 2 languages across 2 oceans. For one girl who finally fell asleep. The doctor came. The fever broke by the 2nd night. Nora stayed for 4 days. She slept in a chair beside the hearth. She made broth. She made tea. She made oatmeal. Cormac came up twice a day with Pete. Roisin drove up from the village in her own car as soon as the road was passable and brought groceries and clean blankets and a small bowl of holy water from the parish church. The 4 of them. A retired farmer, a widow, a parish clerk, a stonemason, took care of her like she was theirs. When Naomi was well enough to sit up in the chair by the fire, she looked at the 3 of them, sitting around her cottage, drinking tea, as if they had been doing this together their whole lives. She did not cry. She had cried enough. She just thought, you can be thrown out, you can be put on a doorstep, you can lose the people who were supposed to keep you, and then you can be found by strangers who become yours. Winter passed. Naomi opened Bridget's letters slowly, over many weeks, reading only 1 or 2 at a time. They were love letters and rage letters and grief letters and prayer letters. They were everything a woman could not say out loud to a man who had come home from a war wrong. They were the conversation she had needed to have with her husband and could not. Naomi did not share them with anyone. She kept them for herself, and for Bridget, the way Bridget had kept them. For 80 years, she began to write. She wrote every morning, with a cup of tea, at the wooden table, light coming in through the windows, the fire low, the Atlantic outside. She wrote about her grandmother. She wrote about her mother. She wrote about Bridget and Liam. She wrote about herself. By February, she had a folder of poems. In March, she sent 3 of them, with a short cover letter, to a small literary magazine based in Galway, the Galway Review. In April, the editor called her. We want all 3, the editor said, and we want to talk about a chapbook. Naomi sat in the cottage with the phone against her ear. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, very softly, "Thank you." The poems came out in May. The one called The Woman Who Hid Her Grief Beneath the Hearth got picked up by a literary blog in Dublin. The blog had a large following. The poem went around. A small newspaper in County Mayo ran a feature on the young American poet who had bought a cottage for €1 and was writing about the woman who had lived there before her. Naomi did not read the comments. She did not look at the share counts. She kept writing, but somewhere, in Brookline, Massachusetts, on the other side of the Atlantic, a woman who worked the night shift at Brigham and Women's Hospital Saw the poem on her phone during her break in the staff room. 3:30 in the morning. She read it. She read it twice. She read it a third time. And then, Chiamaka Achebe, 44 years old, mother of one daughter, sat on the staff room couch at 3:30 in the morning, and she put her face in her hands, and she wept for 45 minutes, without making a sound, the way nurses learn to weep when there are sleeping patients down the hallway. She did not tell her husband. She booked a flight. 3 days later, she was on a plane. The phone in the cottage rang at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday in May. Naomi answered. "Pet, it was Roisin. I have a situation here at the office." "What kind of situation?" "There is a woman. A woman. A woman from America. She says she is your mother. She has been crying for the past 20 minutes. I have given her tea, but she will not stop. I told her you would want to be the one to come and see her." The phone went silent. Naomi did not breathe. The cottage went still. The fire crackled. Outside, a magpie called. Naomi's voice came out very small. "Tell her. Tell her I will come." "All right, pet. Tell her." "What, pet?" "Tell her to wait." Naomi walked the 3 miles to the village. She walked slowly. She was not in any hurry. She had been ready for many things since she walked out of the Brookline house on the morning of her 18th birthday. She had not been ready for this. The road, the stone walls, the sheep, the blackthorn hedges, the far gray glint of the Atlantic. Everything looked exactly the way it had looked on the day she walked the other direction, with a suitcase, with a euro coin from a stranger, with a ring on her finger that had words inside the band she had not yet read. She came over the rise above the village. She saw the parish office. She stopped. She touched the ring on her right index finger. She walked the last 100 yards. She opened the door of the office. The bell rang. Her mother stood up. Naomi closed the door behind her. Chiamaka Achebe was 44 years old. She was wearing a coat that was too thin for an Irish May. She had not slept on the plane. Her makeup was gone. Her hair was scraped back into a knot. She looked older, smaller, less polished than Naomi had ever seen her. She looked, for the first time in Naomi's life, like a woman who could be hurt. The two of them stood 10 feet apart, in a small whitewashed parish office, in a village on the edge of the Atlantic. Naomi did not speak first. Her mother spoke first, in English, very quietly. "I read your poem." Naomi did not answer. Her mother's chin trembled. "Naomi, I read your poem, about the woman, the cottage, the grief beneath the hearth. I know. I sat in the staff room, at work, at 3:30 in the morning, and I read it 3 times. And I knew, Naomi, I knew that the woman in the poem was not just Bridget Connolly. I knew that the woman in the poem was also me." Naomi did not move. Her mother's voice broke. "I am the woman who hid her grief beneath the hearth. I have hidden it for 25 years. I came to this country to tell you. I came to this country to tell you the truth." Naomi looked at Roisin. Roisin nodded. Once, and got up, and walked out the back door of the office, quietly, leaving them alone. Naomi sat down across from her mother. She did not touch her. She did not hug her. She did not say, "Mom." She just said, very quietly, "Tell me." The cottage was warm when they got there. Naomi had walked the 3 miles back. Her mother had ridden in the passenger seat of Roisin's car as far as the end of the path. Then she had walked the last 1/4 mile beside her daughter, in a coat too thin for Ireland in May. Naomi opened the oak door. Her mother stepped inside. She stopped. She looked at the small altar on the mantel, the journal, the rosary, the balmo, the silver crucifix, the two small framed photographs Naomi had hung, one of her grandmother Adaeze, one of Bridget Connolly. Chiamaka Achebe put her hand over her mouth. She did not speak. Naomi made tea. She did not rush. She built up the fire. She set the kettle on the iron crane. She brought out the good cups. She poured. She sat down in one of the wooden chairs. She gestured to the other. Her mother sat. They did not speak for almost 20 minutes. The fire crackled. The kettle had cooled. Outside, a few late afternoon raindrops were starting to hit the windows. Then Chiamaka began. She spoke for 2 hours. Naomi did not interrupt. Her mother told her about Lagos in the late 1990s, about being 20 years old, about the small literary circle in the city where young women wrote poetry in English and in Igbo and read it aloud to each other in dim apartments above shops in Yaba and Surulere, about the small magazine that had published her first poem when she was 19, about the program in London, the writing program in London. In 2001, Chiamaka had been accepted. She had not told her own mother for 2 months because she was afraid of disappointing her, of asking for things her family could not afford, of being told no. But Adaeze had not said no. When Chiamaka finally told her, Adaeze had taken her hand and said, "You will go, even if I have to sell my wedding ring to send you." Adaeze had been ready to sell her wedding ring for her daughter to go to London to write. It was Chiamaka's father, Adaeze's husband, a respected accountant in Lagos, a serious man, a man who loved his daughter but who could not allow his only daughter to leave for England to study poetry. He had said no. Adaeze had begged. He had said no. Chiamaka had cried for a week, and then, because she was 20 years old, and because she loved her father, and because she did not yet have the courage Adaeze was trying to teach her, Chiamaka had said yes to her father, instead of yes to herself. She had not gone to London. She had gone into nursing. She had met Emeka. She had married him. She had crossed an ocean. She had come to Boston. She had had Naomi. And on the day Naomi was born, in 2007, Chiamaka had held her newborn daughter in her arms in the maternity ward at Brigham and Women's, and she had made a promise to herself that Naomi would never, ever take the path that her mother had taken, the safe path, the careful path, the path Chiamaka had walked because she did not have the courage to walk the other one. But she had said it the wrong way to herself. She had said, Naomi will be safe. Naomi will be steady. Naomi will not waste her life on dreams that do not pay rent. She had told herself she was protecting her daughter from disappointment. She had not seen, for 17 years, that she was actually trying to keep her daughter from doing the very thing she herself had been afraid to do. She was angry at Naomi for being braver than she had been. That was the truth Chiamaka had hidden under the hearth of her own chest for 25 years. When she finally said it out loud, in a stone cottage in Ireland, to the daughter she had thrown out of her own house, she put her face in her hands, and she sobbed, the way women sob when they have finally told a thing they should have told 2 decades earlier. Naomi, Naomi, I am so sorry. Naomi did not move from her chair, not for a long moment. She watched her mother cry. She felt many things. She did not feel forgiveness yet. She was not ready. But she felt one thing she had not felt in a year. She felt sorry, not pity, sorry, for her mother, For the 20-year-old girl in Lagos who had wanted to write. For the woman who had stood on her porch on a June morning a year ago with a packed suitcase in her hands, and who had thought she was being a strong mother, and who had really been a frightened one. Naomi got up. She walked to the table. She picked up her grandmother's letter, the one she had found in the lining of the journal. In the Boston hostel. A year ago, she brought it back to the chair. She sat down again. She held the letter out to her mother. "Read this," she said. Her mother took it. She unfolded it with shaking hands. She read it. She read it twice. She got to the line about the inside of the ring. Naomi pulled the chain out from under her shirt. The chain with 2 rings on it. Adaise's and Bridget Connolly's. She lifted off Adaise's ring. She held it out to her mother. "Look inside," Naomi said. Her mother took the ring. She held it up to the lamplight. She squinted at the band. She read the Igbo. She covered her mouth with her hand. "She left this for me to find," Naomi said. "Years ago, long before this happened." Chiamaka was sobbing again now, with the ring in her hand, with her own mother's last message held up to the cottage light. "She was on my side," Naomi said. "I know, and you knew about the letter, the one in the lining. I knew. You promised her you would give it to me. I promised, and you did not." Chiamaka shook her head. She could not speak. "Why, Mom?" "Because I knew what she had written." Chiamaka whispered. "I knew she had given you permission to leave, and I was not ready to give you permission to leave. And I thought if I held the letter long enough, you would not need it. You would stay." Naomi sat with that. She let it settle. Her mother kept the ring pressed to her cheek, her own mother's ring, the one she had not seen since the day Adaise died. "Mom." "Yes, pet." The Irish word slipped out of Chiamaka without her noticing. The word she had heard Roy Sheen use that morning. The word the women of Achill used to mean darling. The word that meant "I love you" without saying so. Naomi looked at her mother. She did not say "I forgive you." She was not ready. She just reached across the small space between their chairs, and she took her mother's hand. She held it. She did not let go. That, for now, was all that forgiveness could be. The beginning of it. In a cottage. In Ireland. By the hearth that had held secrets for 80 years, and was now holding 2 more women, learning to put theirs down. The 2 of them walked to the village church the next evening. It was Chiamaka's idea. Naomi did not know if her mother had ever set foot in a Catholic church since leaving Lagos. Her mother had been raised Catholic. She had stopped going to Mass in Boston 10 years ago, but she said she wanted to see this church, the one in the poem, the one where Bridget had prayed. They sat in a back pew. The church was empty. The light from the stained glass was the color of late evening Atlantic water, the smell of candle wax and old wood and stone. Chiamaka sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "Naomi, there is one more thing. Yes, your father. What about him?" "He wanted to come." "When today?" Naomi did not move. Chiamaka swallowed. "He read your poem too. He read it the night before I flew out. He sat at the kitchen table and he read it twice, and then he put his head down on his arms, and he cried. Naomi, your father cried at the kitchen table. I have not seen your father cry since the day my mother died." Naomi could not speak. "He wanted to be on the plane with me. He bought a ticket. He stood at the gate. And then he turned around at the last minute. He said, 'She does not need both of us showing up. She needs one of us first, and it has to be you.' Because you are the one who packed the suitcase. Naomi's eyes filled. He said that. He said that. He is sorry too, Naomi. He is sorrier than I am. He has been sorry every day. He just did not know how to say it. He is from a place where men do not know how to say it, and he is too proud to learn fast. Naomi looked at the small statue of the Blessed Mother at the front of the church, the one Bridget had knelt in front of for 3 hours in 1953, praying for the next person. She thought about her father going to the bank. She thought about him reading the poem at the kitchen table, with his head down on his arms. She thought about him standing at the gate and turning around. She felt something settle in her chest, slow, quiet, like a stone being lowered carefully into the right place. She turned to her mother. "I am not ready to say I forgive either of you," Naomi said. "I know, but I am ready to start." Her mother began to cry again, quietly this time, the way her own mother used to cry, with dignity. Naomi took her hand. She held it through the rest of the silence. And outside the church, somewhere up the road, in a cottage with a great stone hearth, a small fire burned low and waited for them to come home. The next morning they were in the garden. Naomi was teaching her mother to pull weeds from around the rose bushes that grew thick along the south wall. The work was slow. Their hands got dirty. They knelt side by side on the soft June ground. Chiamaka stopped. She pointed. "Naomi, that stone." "What stone?" "That one. At the base of the rose. It is loose." Naomi looked. Her mother was right. A small, flat stone, set into the ground at the base of the oldest rose bush, almost hidden under the leaves, slightly lower than the surrounding earth, as if it had been set there. Once, on purpose, by a woman who had been planting roses she would never see bloom. Naomi got a trowel. She and her mother worked the stone loose together. Underneath was a small tin tube, about 6 inches long, rust on the outside, sealed at both ends with wax. Naomi looked at her mother. Her mother looked at her. They sat on the grass. Naomi worked the wax off one end of the tube with her thumbnail. She tipped the tube. A small rolled piece of paper slid out. She unrolled it. The handwriting was Bridget Connolly's. The paper was dated April 1953. "To whoever finds this. If you have read my journal beneath the hearth, then you know the story I chose to tell. If you have read the letters in the wall, then you know the story I could not tell. And if you have found this tube under the rose, then you have looked everywhere there is to look, and you have stayed long enough to garden. Which means you have made this place yours. So I will say one last thing. I want you to know, I was not alone here, not even in the worst years. The Blessed Mother sat with me every long night of my life in this cottage. I do not ask you to believe what I believe. I only ask you to know that I was held. And I believe with my whole soul that Our Lady will send someone to this cottage who needs to be held the way I needed to be held. If you are reading this, maybe you are that person, or maybe you are the one who came with that person, and you needed to be held too. Either way, welcome home. Let the cottage take care of you, the way it took care of me. Bridget Marie Connolly. April 1953. Naomi finished reading. She looked up at her mother. Her mother was sitting in the long grass beside the rose bush, her hands in the dirt, her cheeks streaked with tears, her shoulders shaking. She was praying, not in English, not in Latin, in Igbo, the language her own mother had prayed in, the language Chiamaka had not used in 25 years. Naomi laid the small rolled paper across her open palm. She placed her other hand on top of her mother's hand. Above them, a small flock of magpies lifted off the blackthorn hedge and rose into the Atlantic sky. The last secret was out, and the secret was love. There is a small stone cottage on the western edge of Ireland. The roof is sound now. The chimney is tall again. The wild roses bloom along the south wall every June. Inside, there is a wooden mantel above a great stone hearth. On the mantel are the things that belong there. A leather journal, dated 1939. A bundle of letters tied with twine. A wooden rosary. A worn pocket Bible. A silver crucifix on a delicate chain. A small rolled paper sealed in a tin tube. And two small framed photographs. One of an old woman in Lagos. One of a young couple in 1933. There are two rings on a small gold chain, hanging from a hook beneath the mantel. There is a young woman who lives there now. She is in her early 20s. She writes every morning. By the wooden table, with a cup of tea, with the fire low, with the Atlantic outside, she has published 2 collections of poetry. Her mother visits every summer, for 2 weeks, sometimes 3. Her father came the 2nd year. He stayed for 10 days. He walked the cliffs. He sat by the hearth in the evenings. He did not say much, but on the last night, he took his daughter's hand, and he said, in English, very quietly, "Naomi, I am sorry. I should have spoken sooner." She forgave him that night. She had forgiven her mother the summer before. Forgiveness, she would write later in one of her poems, is not a door you open once. It is a door you keep opening. Every morning, for as long as the people on the other side keep walking through. Her grandmother Adeze was right. Rings know things. The ring traveled somewhere Naomi never expected, to a stone cottage on the western edge of Ireland, where it found a sister ring, waiting in a tin box under a hearthstone for 80 years. The hearth holds what the heart cannot carry. Some grief is too heavy to carry through a whole life. It has to be put down somewhere. A hearth is a good place, because a hearth is a place of warmth and rest, and what is set down in a hearth does not disappear. It waits. It waits for the next person who can lift it. Naomi Achebe was 18 years old and locked out. She had $1 to her name. She spent it on a crumbling stone cottage on the western coast of Ireland. It was the best dollar she ever spent. 80 years ago, a woman knelt in a small parish church on the edge of the Atlantic, and she prayed for the person who would find her cottage next. That prayer was answered. It just took 80 years, and 1 ring, and 1 grandmother who knew, and 1 mother who finally learned how to say I'm sorry, and 1 young woman who walked out of a house that was locked and kept walking until she found a door that opened